Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are jumping straight into a massive perspective shift. We're going to look at history, theology, and frankly, human psychology to uncover the true identity of a figure recognized literally across the globe, Prophet Abraham. The stuff we're looking at today, it completely challenges the everyday labels we throw around. It asks us to fundamentally rethink what it actually means to belong to a faith. It's an absolutely fascinating exploration, and I am so pumped to walk you through the brilliant logic it lays out. So our journey starts with a question that, seems pretty simple on the surface, but it actually creates a historically impossible paradox. What was Abraham's religion? Think about it. If you ask people today, some would instantly say, oh, he was Jewish. Others might confidently tell you, no, he was Christian. And honestly, that's a totally natural reflex, right? We always try to cram monumental historical figures into the neat little categories we're most familiar with. But as you'll see, taking just a slightly closer look at history instantly shatters these retroactive labels. It really challenges our basic preconceptions. Let's just look at the timeline for a second to see exactly why that is. Notice the huge, vast separation of eras here. We start way back in antiquity with Adam and Noah, and then we have Abraham. Now, look at the massive gap between Abraham and later prophets like Moses and Jesus. I mean, he lived centuries, literally centuries before them. This highlights a really stark, logical impossibility. How could Abraham possibly be Jewish or Christian when those specific traditions, and even their names, emerged ages after he had already lived and died? It just doesn't add up. So to answer this, we turn to a specific verse from the Quran, Surah Al-Imran, verse 67, which tackles this exact historical dilemma head-on. The first half of the verse says it plain as day. Abraham was neither a Jew nor a Christian. Boom. That statement completely dismantles those modern demographic boxes we keep trying to force this great prophet into. It makes it crystal clear that Abraham wasn't tied to those specific religious titles that came much, much later. So if he wasn't either of those, what exactly was he? Well, check out how this second half of the verse answers that. It says, but he was one in climbing toward truth, a Muslim. Right there. The answer has always been there, yet it is so widely misunderstood, mostly because of how we use language today. We really have to pause here and ask ourselves, is the word Muslim in this context just another demographic label, or does it carry a much older, deeper meaning, a meaning that applied long, long before the final prophet Muhammad even arrived? To really grasp this, we need to break down the specific Arabic words used in the verse, starting with Hanif. Now, the crucial thing to know here is that Hanif doesn't just mean someone who is, passively good. It represents an active, deliberate inclination. Abraham lived among a people who literally worshipped idols made of stone, statues that couldn't hear, couldn't see, and certainly couldn't help anyone. But Abraham didn't just blindly go along with his society to keep the peace. He actively inclined away from that polytheism and turned completely toward pure monotheism, which is known as Tawhid. And that leads us straight into redefining the word Islam itself. Today, we so often think of Islam merely as a modern identity card, right? Like a noun representing a specific demographic group. But in its original core essence, Islam is a profound active verb. It literally means the active state of submission to God, complete obedience, and pure monotheism. Abraham was Muslim because he actively, completely surrendered his will to the one creator. This brilliantly illustrates a really important distinction. On one hand, we have general Islam. This is the timeless, universal message of submission and pure monotheism that was preached by all the prophets. We're talking Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, the whole lineage. Now contrast that with the specific Sharia. These are the detailed legal frameworks and specific rulings that came much later with Prophet Muhammad. The daily laws, the specific details, sure, those shifted over time based on what people needed. But that core active submission, that general Islam, that was the exact same thread connecting every single one of them. And that perfectly connects the historical reality of Abraham back to another absolutely foundational Quranic verse. Indeed, the religion in the sight of Allah is Islam. Think about it. This isn't talking about a title written on a census form. It's talking about a universal truth. The acceptable path to God has always been this pure submission and monotheism. It proves the unbroken continuity of the divine message throughout the entirety of human history. Okay, but this brings us to a really brilliant probing question, and this is where we shift from ancient history into human psychology. If this truth is so consistent, so deeply logical, and so clear across all these different eras, why do people differ? I mean, why is there so much division and sectarian conflict out there? If the core message of the prophets was singular and unified, where did all these endless disputes actually come from? Well, we find the answer in a pretty tragic reality noted in the scriptures. It highlights this specific phrase: differences arose after knowledge has come to them. Just let that sink in for a second. Human disputes over religion, they rarely stem from a genuine lack of evidence or some great unsolved mystery about the truth. The heartbreaking reality is that people fracture, they divide, and they argue even after the clear truth has already been fully presented to them. So why on earth would anyone do that? The text actually outlines the internal barriers, basically the ego, that block people from accepting a clear truth. We're talking about transgression and envy. Blindly following pre-existing desires simply because the truth doesn't align with what they already want. It's the ego absolutely refusing to submit to an authority higher than itself. And finally, it's that deep-seated stubborn urge to seek victory for one's own opinion, rather than seeking what is actually right. The truth might be staring them right in the face, but sometimes the human soul just refuses to bow to it. This builds into a really stark contrast between two distinct types of people. The source contrasts the seeker of truth with the seeker of victory. A genuine seeker of truth, they'll adjust their beliefs, their daily habits, their entire life to align with the truth the moment they find it. But a seeker of victory, actually, they just want the truth to adjust to validate what they already decided was right all along. They aren't looking for transformation. They're literally just looking for evidence to win an argument. Now contrast that stubborn ego with Abraham's own powerful declaration, which shows us exactly what true, sincere submission actually looks like. Abraham said, "I have turned my face toward He who created the heavens and the earth." Notice the active phrasing he uses here. It wasn't just some passive, "oh yeah, I guess that makes sense," mental acknowledgement. He didn't just know the truth in his head. He actively turned his face, his heart, and the entire direction of his life toward the Creator. So how exactly did Abraham pull this off? He gives us this perfect step-by-step blueprint for finding the truth. Step 1, he completely refused to just blindly swallow his inherited culture. Step 2, he actually used his intellect and reason to question the totally illogical worship of idols around him. Step 3, he didn't hide away. He engaged his people, bringing clear evidence and debate to the table. And finally, once the truth was undeniable, he submitted completely to the Creator. It's not easy. It requires intense intellectual effort and honestly immense spiritual courage. And that brings us to the absolute core thesis of this entire explainer. It summarizes that Islam, in its truest, original Abrahamic sense, is not just a label. It's not some historical club you just happen to inherit from your parents. It is a profound, lived vow between a human being and their Lord. It is an ongoing, everyday commitment to choose the truth over your own desires, to course correct and return to the right path when you mess up, and to constantly, actively submit your ego to God's will. So here is where we turn this historical narrative into a direct, piercing mirror for all of us. We leave the ancient history behind for a second and ask you a very direct question. If the truth appears to you, will you truly submit to it? If you find a truth that totally contradicts your current habits, your deepest desires, or what your society tells you, do you have the courage of Abraham to actually follow it? It's a heavy question. It challenges every single one of us to evaluate our own spiritual sincerity. To really drive this home, the text isolates the uncompromising conclusion from that original verse we looked at earlier. It states it so simply, "and he was not of the polytheists." That right there is the ultimate defining characteristic of Abraham's pure legacy. No matter the intense pressure, no matter the social isolation he faced, he stripped away all false idols, both physical and psychological, and stood solely, completely with the one true God. We're going to wrap up today's explainer with this incredibly beautiful, highly personal, and really actionable prayer. Oh God, show me the truth as truth and grant me its following. Because, it's one thing to just see the truth, but it's an entirely different level of grace to be granted the strength to actually follow through with it. I want to leave you with this provocative thought today. As you navigate your own life and your own beliefs, are you just seeking victory for your own opinions? Or are you, like Abraham, truly seeking to follow the truth, no matter where it leads? Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll catch you next time.